The Vergas Show is brought to you by Spanky's Stone Hearth, casual fine dining on the shores of beautiful Rose Lake.
With 2 locations in Vergas and Perham, make the right call. Call Hanson's, the most trusted name in plumbing and heating.
Vergas State Bank, your locally owned full-service bank.
Hi, welcome to the Vergas Show. I'm back again with Bob Lamb and Alwyn Martinson, our World War II vets. Last week we heard from Bob. And Bob, thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Thank you for your service. And I know you were in from 42 to 46. Would you like to close it up before we go talk to Alwyn?
Well,
what would you like to say? You know, we thank you for your service, and
you're most welcome. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And you've got a great book that you gave me to read through, and I just really appreciate it. And like you said, whenever you wear your World War II veterans hat, people seem to recognize that.
Down the store restaurant down here, and had lunch one day, and I went to go and said, "There's a couple over here paying for it." And not only that, somebody else paid for it.
All right, so you got a double lunch. Well, that's good, and that's how it should be.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, well, good. Thank you for joining us. And Alwyn, tell me a little bit about your experience. You're a World War II vet also. You weren't on a carrier like that Bob was, but you were on, well, I'll let you tell all about it.
Well, I was on a troop ship, and we went to Hawaii first, and there we trained for the regiment would go set up communications on the beach.
Now, Alwyn, you were like Bob. You were only 17 years old, right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we would get communications set up. Well, then we went from Hawaii to Guam. Well, then they transferred me to the 4th Marine Division, the Tank Division. So I trained with making landings with them, and then we took off for Iwo-Jima. And I found out afterwards that there's 4 of us guys in the boat. We led the first wave of tanks in to Iwo-Jima. And
if you would have known that then, it would have made, you would have probably been much more. We talked a little bit about that. I mean, you didn't really know what you were getting into when you go at 17 years old.
No. But we got the tanks in there, and then I went back to the ship, and instead of staying on the beach, I would go back and forth. I would stand my 6-hour watch and get 6 hours off. But on those 6 hours off, then I'd get in the boat and we'd haul supplies in. They always had to have a radio along, just in case. And well, we went in there this one day, and the skipper told us they had to clean up a lot of blown up stuff to make room for unloading. And so we got that cleaned up and got the boat unloaded, ready to go back to the ship, and the 4 of us got in the boat, and then they dropped a 5-inch shell down between the 4 of us. We were lucky it didn't explode or anything. It could have been a dud. But anyway, we had taken a lot of water, so I called the ship and said, "You'll have to wait for us," because they went out to sea at night, so they have more maneuvering room. And they said, "Well, we can't wait." And so we circled for about 45 minutes, and they didn't hit us again. They tried, and it got dark. So then we run the boat up on the shore when it was dark, and the 4 of us crawled up to the front end, and we laid down and went to sleep. And see, we didn't have any rifles, anything with us, so we couldn't shoot. And if any Japs did come around, they probably thought we were dead, and they weren't going to waste any ammunition on us. And next morning, we started bailing water again with our hard hats and made it back to the ship.
When you talked a little bit earlier about, and I thought it was really interesting, like how you could tell the torpedoes were coming, but also how those destroyer ships were meant to protect the big ships.
Yeah, you'd think that you're safe with all those big ships, the carriers and the battleships, but the destroyers, they were always on the outside of the fleet, and and they could maneuver better than any of the other ships, and they were faster. And if there would be a wake in the water, if a torpedo was coming, and they would get in the way of that torpedo if they had to. If it was going to hit a big ship, because carriers and battleships, they couldn't maneuver and move out of the way as fast. So the destroyer would take the hit if it had to, just to protect that big ship, because that
was what they were there for. Yeah,
yeah, that's right.
And you would be able to see the torpedoes coming.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But you couldn't see those big shells coming.
No, no, you couldn't.
But except when we went in that first morning at Iwo, the battleships were firing, and it looked like a big moon just floating along. You'd think it would never make it to that island, but it did. But it was just a big red ball up there. Mm-hmm.
So you were in for 4 years.
Yes.
And you talk about how you really didn't have, any breaks, did you?
No. I left there in 44, and I came back on the day that the Japs surrendered. I came back to the States. I was never back stateside all during that time.
All during that time.
No.
And so do you still keep in contact with some of the people that you were, there was 2,000 people on this ship
right.
of yours, right?
Yeah.
Yours was named what?
USS Logan.
Logan.
Do
you remember the size?
It was about 400 and some feet. And it wasn't
a carrier, though.
It wasn't
a
a big ship.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
And
but you do keep in touch with people, and I know you're very active in our Veterans of Foreign Wars Association. I see you marching in the summers.
I'm getting too old for that now.
Well, and are there a lot of World War II veterans? What are the percentage of when you go to VFW meetings and that? There's not a lot of you left, are there?
No, I think there's only 2 of us that come to the meeting now, and like you say, there isn't very many World War II veterans left.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and when I talk about, I mentioned to Bob about how the fact that he wears his hat, and how do you think the patriotism in our country is now compared to when you were in service? Not
near as good.
No.
No, you could go when you were in the service. If you wanted to go someplace and you didn't have much money, we got $21 a month, and so you'd hitchhike, and they'd pick you up and ask you where you wanted to go, take you there.
Buy you a meal.
Yeah. If you'd go to the USO, and there would be names of people that wanted they'd come and pick you up and go to your house for dinner.
Sure. That's a lot different. I think it's a good thing for us all to remember, too, because our veterans are still our veterans. They're the ones who were on these battleships. They are the ones that were... You guys were out there fighting. You didn't have... you enlisted, yes, but you would have been drafted if you had not been enlisted. And like you said, Bob, any second it was, you were just between here and death.
Yeah, it would just a split second. If he hadn't hung onto that stick, I wouldn't be here talking to you.
Right. Well, and I'm glad you are. Yeah. Well, make sure that when you see a veteran in your area to not only thank them, but maybe give them a little extra hug, and like Bob said, buy them a pie and coffee. Who knows? Especially
Detroit Lakes or somewhere. So when you walk in a store somewhere, there's always somebody comes and thanks me for my service.
All right.
So they are.
They do think of it, and it doesn't take long to just do that. So you have a good day in Vergas, and stay tuned. Next week we'll have one more Veterans Show for you before we celebrate Veterans Day on the 11th of November. You have a good day.